Hello, and welcome to Lex Dei Podcast. My name is Martha, and in this podcast, we'll try to deep dive into some of our generation's rarely spoken questions on today's social and political issues. So, we aim to present Lex, which actually is Latin for law, or the law of man, and Dei, which means God, or the truth of God, and really see how these two can actually and if they can actually come together, merge together. In each episode, I will be joined by an expert of the law of man, or what we know as the Constitution, and the other on the law of God, or the teachings of the Church. Today with me, we will hear from a human rights lawyer and a faculty of 3 law schools, Atty. And the theologian and professor, Professor Raoul Roncal. So sit back, relax, open your minds, and let's take a look at things through the lenses of Lex and Dei. Alright, so I'm so excited to get started on our first ever episode of Lex and Dei. Lex Dei. So I wanted to welcome you all here.
That's right. I'm excited to talk to the two of you. I mean, this is a project that I've been looking forward to.
For sure. Months in the making.
I've been listening to podcasts, and I have a few podcasts, and so I'm very excited also for this podcast, and I'm excited with this combination, the 3 of us together on a podcast.
Yeah. And
maybe the question would be how did we get together?
Kasi naturally, probably we won't be talking to each other, right? But because we're part of a prayer group, no, called Ligaya ng Panginoon, and I think all of us, and Ligaya ng Panginoon has been around for 48 years. Tagal na, di ba? I mean, so, and this prayer group is composed of Catholics who really want to take their faith seriously. And not only that, many members of the Ligaya have been very much involved in nation building and making a difference in society. So that's probably the reason why we've been talking about these different issues, and that's why we met, and that's why we're here together, right? Yeah.
Yes, and we're also in different areas as well, or extensions or outreaches of Ligaya, like the Families for Truth, Justice, and Peace, or we call it the FTJP, and the Good Lawyer Project, or the TGLP, of which I'm involved since I'm a lawyer. Just very quickly, the FTJP is the social action arm of Ligaya. It gets us involved in the contemporary issues that face us as Filipino citizens. And the TGLP is a relatively young group of lawyers who want to live out our faith in our day-to-day practice. It may sound strange to people who don't usually think of lawyers as being very faithful, but it's actually something that happens, and it's actually something that's very real.
It's true, and actually on my end, so I'm part of the extension, which is considered the youth group of Ligaya, called Christ Youth in Action. And I know that young as I am, and the more that these social political issues are, being thrown at me by social media, the more I want to talk about it and really understand today's issues and the facts too behind it.
Yeah. And I guess we could really jump in, and talk about a related topic to begin this podcast that's entitled Lex Dei. We can really talk about an issue that involves the law of God and the law of man. No, I think we could begin.
I think Martha's intro, I think, brings us to that topic very well. No, we can start with the intro that Martha shared with us earlier about how the law of man and the truth of God come together, or do they actually come together, or can they actually come together?
Yeah.
Biggest question, I guess, as people continue. So recently, just to start things off, in the news, being the youth that I am, always on my phone, always on social media, being thrown all the pandemic, lockdown, news, and all the other things happening in government. And for some weird reason, a lot of them go to bishops and priests and ask the media, go to them to ask for their opinion. So yun yung tanong ko. Like, doesn't that create a blurry line
Yeah.
between it's a state issue, it's feedback on, let's say, a certain law or a certain action that was done by a government office, but you're asking a priest to give their comment.
Yeah.
So then it blurs the line, and the question that I'm throwing and opening this episode with is, what about separation of church and state?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me begin with the passage in the Gospels. In this story, it seems that this question of separation of church and state is not something new. It happened in the Gospels. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus was confronted by religious leaders. You know the quick background, right? The Jews were under the power of Rome.
Rome.
They were like under the rule of the Roman Empire. And Jesus was a Jew. He was confronted by religious leaders with a question. Should we pay taxes? They were asking Jesus. Now, of course, they were trapping Jesus. If Jesus said, yes, you're supposed to pay taxes, and then David will say, oh, you're faithful. You're not being a faithful Jew. But if he says, we don't pay taxes, oh, you're in trouble with the Romans. But he answered by this intriguing statement. He says, render to Caesar, Caesar is the emperor, the leader of the Roman Empire, the things that are Caesar's, and to God, the things that are God's. That was his answer. That's a classic uh, question. That's separation of state and church. But then Jesus gives an answer. That's his answer.
Right. That's usually the go-to verse that everyone throws when they're talking about separation of church and state. And
yeah,
I mean, it seems right in that time, kasi, correct me if I'm wrong, but at that time, tax collectors were also very people that were, people looked away from them because they were corrupt and frugal.
And they were corrupt because they were trying to get money from their fellow Jews in order to give it to the Roman Empire. And they need to add more taxes so that they could also get some money for themselves. Yeah. So, I mean, that was the problem, no? And Jesus was then giving this very interesting insight. Okay, yes, give taxes to Rome. Right. But he also added something.
But so it's really a respect.
Yeah. Play. Yes. But then he said, you need to also give to God what belongs to God. And the Jews, that they knew that. That's a very important thing for them, because for them, God was the center of their universe, the Jewish nation. No? So, yeah. That was the...
It's like they had different centers, diba?
Yeah.
How to be a good citizen in the church and of the world, and be a good citizen of heaven, or what they thought of as heavenly at that time.
Yes.
And so but maybe Raoul, and Martha, no, because that verse, that's always been, as Martha says, the go-to verse for separation of church and state. But Jesus really does not say church there, right? So maybe we need to understand, what does church mean? Ano ba ibig sabihin ng church? Talaga?
That's right, Ted. No? And I think, yes, and I think, Ted, automatically when people think about God, in our society, church. But then I noticed that the word church can mean a few things. Most people would say church means the building, obviously. Yeah. That's not what we're talking about. But the second most popular one is the church is the leaders, the bishops, the cardinals, even the pope. Just the leaders. But the things have changed, especially Vatican II, this major meeting that happened in the 1960s, changed that perspective. And the emphasis has become, no, the church is all baptized Christians. That's the church. So it means, you mentioned a while ago, right? Oh, lawyers are supposed to be people of integrity, right? You remember you said that? Now, so if a lawyer is a Catholic and he is part of the church and he is church, then I would apply what Jesus said. Hey, lawyer, you need to also give to God what is God, huh?
Right.
What you owe God. So it means that that lawyer is, in a certain way, obligated to live a life of integrity to fight for truth.
Right.
It will be not right for a lawyer to be known to be that lawyer, his integrity is questionable.
Right. So jumping off of that, adding the Lex side to things. So what's the lawyers, as a lawyer, Ted, how's that struggle like for you? What's the perspective on your side about this issue?
Yeah, church and state separation is always a hot issue. It's taught in constitutional law, no? Because it's part of the Constitution. Our Constitution says that the separation of church and state shall be inviolable, meaning there are matters that are considered matters of the church and matters of the state. And what usually happens is people get confused, no? As you put it at the start, the lines get blurred because they hear priests and bishops, even the Pope, making statements that they say are political, or statements that criticize government. No? So is that a violation of the church and state principle? No? So very quickly, just to say that that principle actually has two parts, two aspects. Let me just use that word, no, aspects. The first aspect is freedom to worship, freedom of religion, basically. No? And the second aspect is what lawyers call non-establishment. So the first aspect says that the government, the state, cannot interfere with a person's decision to worship or to believe or to have faith. So government cannot pass a law, for example, that says you cannot pray, okay, or you cannot have a belief. So that would be a violation of the freedom of religion. That's the first
Mm.
aspect. And the second aspect is non-establishment. No, the state cannot uh, require one religion for all, or the state cannot require a particular religion for all. No, so that's why it's called non-establishment. So if you notice, the two aspects are directed towards government, nothing directed towards the church. No, so
Mm.
where's the separation? The separation is this: government cannot interfere with the church. But the
Mm.
church, when you are part of the church, as Raul put it, every one of us, we're part of the church. If we worship, if we express our faith by going to mass or praying, government has to respect that freedom.
Mm. Mm.
And the second aspect, if you're a Catholic, you're a Protestant, you're an evangelical, you're a Buddhist, you're a Muslim, government cannot tell you you cannot be any of those religions. You just have
Mm.
to be this religion. So that's the second part. So if you notice, it gives more freedom, you know, to the church rather than less freedom. And that's really the purpose of the separation. No, it's really
Mm.
to give more freedom to the church rather than to remove freedoms from the church. Yun
Mm.
yung ibig sabihin nun, ng separation of church and state from the constitutional point of view.
Okay.
Right.
So Ted, even if so like the Philippine government, even if like we're predominantly Catholics here, the president who's a devout Catholic cannot declare from now on Catholicism is the religion of the Philippines. No, I mean that's part
Medyo
of
Yes,
the.
dictator
yes,
level.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
oh.
That can't be done. No, one very specific example, for example, that I can give, where
Mm.
of a state that where there's no separation between church and state would be a theocracy, where
Yes.
the leader of the political arm is also the leader of the church. Okay, so we know of countries like that. For example, Iran. No, it is a theocracy. Some Middle Eastern countries are also theocracies. The head of government is also the head of the church. So ganun yung consequence if
Development.
there's
Yeah.
no separation of church and state. But because we have separation of church and state, our political leader, meaning let's say the president, no, is not the head of the church, cannot be
Yes.
the head of the church, and the president cannot require
Yeah.
someone to say, you can only believe or have this particular faith, or you cannot subscribe to this faith, but only choose this. Hindi pwedeng gawin yun.
Yeah.
That would be a violation of the separation.
And that's the problem that Jesus was facing in the biblical times, because the Jews were actually used to a situation wherein their religion and their politics was the same. But then they
Yes.
found themselves under the Roman rule. They could not
Yes.
apply the same thing before, because when it was in the Old Testament, you remember King David? King David
Yes.
was the political leader and the religious
Yes.
leader at the same time. That was
At
their
the same time.
understanding.
That's
So
right.
that's why that became a very intriguing question by the time the
And
Romans
and that's
occupied
that's why
Israel.
the verse that's why the verse that Jesus gave, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, render to God what is God, is both a politically astute statement
Yes.
because he recognized that too, but it was also a very radical statement. Diba? To the
Yes.
Jews na Jesus was apparently recognizing sovereignty of Rome.
Right.
No? But at the same time, he was emphasizing the sovereignty of God.
Yes.
So it was astute, but it was, I think, also very clear what he wanted to say.
Yep.
Actually, that's super. This first question pa lang, already so much clarity, right? Because for me, all this time, it was okay. That means the church can't interfere. It was reverse.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's how I
Yeah.
It's
understood it.
actually the reverse. It's actually
Right.
the reverse. So, for example, people tend to think, you're a priest, you're a bishop, you're the pope. You shouldn't be speaking out on
Exactly.
matters of government, matters of politics, for example, because there's a separation of church and state. That's really not the way it should be looked at.
Yeah.
Because again, a priest, for example, is at the same time that he is a member of the church, he's also a member of the country. He's a
Yes.
citizen, for example. So as a citizen, you are free to express your views as anyone is, within
Yeah.
the limits that the law recognizes.
Yeah.
So if the views are views on politics, for example, even though he is a priest, he's not forbidden to express that as far as the law is concerned.
Yes.
Now, the church may have parameters, on whether it is wise to speak out at this time.
Yeah.
But as far as the law is concerned, the law should not interfere with that, especially if, for example, it is recognized as an expression of religion. So, for example, it is a statement made by a particular group of believers. It is a profession of their faith. So,
Yes.
hindi pwedeng pakialaman. The state cannot come in and say,
Yeah.
you cannot
Yeah.
or should not do that.
Yeah.
So, that's how it's to be interpreted.
Baka dapat there should be a more blatant line. So when people speak, I'm speaking on behalf of my personal opinion, or regardless if I'm part of.
But
diba?
you're right, Martha. But you know what? This issue of separation of church and state, freedom of religion, non-establishment, is one of the most difficult topics in constitutional law. You know why? Because the line is really not very clear. That's the difference. So, and in one particular case, for example, decided by the Supreme Court, they actually said what we should do is accommodation rather than separation. Accommodation, kung hindi naman makakasama, no? I mean, it will not cause injury to allow it, then let's accommodate. No? Kung wala, if there is no policy of the state that will be injured by, for example, a profession of religion, then let's accommodate it. So, because the line is not that clear. But you're right. Sana merong line. I hope.
Or when people speak, at
clearer,
least. Oh.
Yeah.
Yes. But because the line is not that clear, it's one of the most difficult, the most hotly debated issues, even in constitutional law.
All right. So, with that, a very insightful discussion. I just wanted to shift it a little bit to, if that's the case that the government shouldn't interfere with church affairs, does that mean, in reverse, that the church can endorse a politician? Very controversial question. But I don't remember the church and I don't remember the church doing block voting, but right now, a lot of my friends are saying, oh, mag-block voting tayo. Or some of my law
Yeah.
friends are saying na hindi ko yan isa-support kung mag-block voting yung church. So, saan ba yung paglalaan?
Yes. And here siguro, Martha, di ba, voting would mean the Catholic Church would declare every Catholic would vote this candidate, di ba? Just to be clear, no?
Yeah.
And you're right. The Catholic Church has not done something like that, and I think it will never do something like that. Although it's very tricky because the understanding of the church is this: everybody has a conscience. So I don't want to get into what exactly is conscience, but
You're
let's
right.
just define it quickly. All of us have the capacity to know what's right and wrong. You know? That's it's inherent in everybody. And for Catholics, we understand, okay, the role of the church is to form and educate people on what's right and wrong. Okay? Certain values, what's right and wrong. And as we form Catholics to understand what's right and wrong, each would then have the capacity or the conscience to determine, okay, who among this candidate can uphold what's right, no, in society. No? And so most likely they would vote along those lines, no? And that's all the church would do. And it would just presume that, hey, we've taught you this, you understand this. There was a time, I don't know if you, of course, you were not yet probably a voting person during the time of ERAP, no? During the ERAP presidential election. Clearly, at that time, the church was just communicating certain truths about what the country needed and what values a certain leader should have. But that's all they did, no? And because they're presuming, okay, at least we're helping people know what's right and wrong, and then let's allow them to use their conscience to make a decision. At least that's one approach that the church has really taken. That's why there's no block voting. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And Raul, I remember there's a case that reached the Supreme Court, no, and it became famous because it's the Team Buhay and the Team
Yes,
Patay.
yes, I know that. Oh, yeah.
Okay, actually, I have
The Diocese of Bacolod versus Comelec. Well, very very quickly, what they did was what the Bishop of Bacolod allowed to happen was they put up tarps on the church grounds, no, huge tarps with the names of people who voted or were supporting the RH bill, RH law
Okay.
at the time. No? And they were lumped together under Team Patay. And then those who opposed it were lumped together under Team Buhay. And so, well, they were basically sued in the Comelec and said that's improper. You shouldn't allow that, and it reached all the way to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court, in the Supreme Court, one of the issues was there a violation of the separation of church and state? No, going back to
Yeah.
Martha's first question in this segment,
Oh.
if government cannot interfere with church affairs, does that mean the church can endorse? No, because if you look at the types, it looked like they were endorsing these people,
Yes.
right? Team Buhay. These are the names of Team Buhay, and these are the names of Team Patay. No, so ito yon. And so, what did the court say? The Supreme Court basically said, look, there's freedom of expression. Uh, that's the first. You acknowledge that these fall within freedom of expression. Secondly, it was private property, so it was the property of the church. The bishop put it up in the premises of the church, and so government cannot come in. No, that's church property. But also the government, the Supreme Court also said it was an interpretation by the bishop, no, that these names fall under the artificial name of Team Buhay and the artificial name of Team Patay. So it was a, well, in a sense it was a political statement. No, it was political speech. It was also satire. The court said it was also satire because there's no such team as Team Patay or Team Buhay. No? There's no such team. Gagawa lang nila yon, di ba?
Yeah.
And then, but the more important thing also that the court said there, not everything the bishop says automatically becomes religious speech. As for example, when the bishop says something about government or politics, no, that's not religious speech. So can government actually come in that issue? Actually, the court said yes, they could actually come in, but because it's freedom of expression, the COMELEC should not regulate that. And then secondly, it's
Mm.
also private property. They
Oh,
cannot
well.
remove the tarps because private property of the church, yung premises on which it was put up. So it's actually exactly what Raul was saying, that what the church would do through the bishops, for example, would put up something like that, educate people, no? Na in a sense, these are the people who are support values consistent with what the church is saying, right?
Tama.
Right.
And these are
Tama.
people who we think don't support those values.
Mm.
So in that sense, is that an endorsement? Maybe it looks like an endorsement, but it doesn't look like black voting, because
Yes.
I think people are still free to appreciate what those names mean.
Yeah. And here you're right, Ted. And the bishop probably was thinking this way. Definitely he was not promoting, let's vote for this Laban party. This or
Yeah.
this let's KBL, and we would rather choose Laban. No. In this particular case, they were expressing, that's the challenging thing. In the Catholic Church, when I said conscience here, we're talking about, because it's conscience, right and wrong. Are you talking about what's the right shirt to wear? No. The right and wrong that we're talking about here is about how you should live your life.
Right.
That's the value of conscience. And so in this particular issue, I didn't realize that that's how the Supreme Court made a judgment. But from the perspective of the Catholic Church, and that bishop was probably expressing, this is about life, value of life. And the Catholic Church is very keen on promoting the value of life.
Right.
And so for them, okay, let's express this is about right and wrong. Life, protection of life is important. That they did, and so very, actually very wise. The bishop was very wise in expressing in this Team Buhay, Team Patay, an ethical value system that the Catholic
Yes.
Church has in mind. And they were promoting it and using it as a way to, hey, you remember this? And
Yeah.
think about what you need to do. No, we're not telling you to vote for this group, but at least consider this. Let your conscience
And and
decide.
and also very creative, because it was
Yeah,
not, it was not outwardly political. It
exactly.
was like, it's like a basketball game, di ba? Team A, Team B, right?
Right.
Ginebra Bayan or San Miguel, for
Mm.
example, right? So Team Buhay, Team Patay. But if you're a regular, member of that church, of that diocese, you will get it. You will get what the
Yes.
bishop is
Yeah.
saying, right? And
Mm.
that's his way. That was his way of driving home the point that we hope you will support these people because they support values that the church supports. Uh, and as far as these people are concerned, we're telling you that they don't stand for the values that we stand for. So that's a judgment by the bishop, which he expressed, very creatively by
Yeah.
putting them in those two banners. But the question is that a violation of church and state? Well, the Supreme Court said no, it's not. No, it's not
Yeah.
a violation of church and state because it was political speech and it was also satire.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, the marketing side in me is actually I really believe that sometimes the church just needs a good marketing team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it can really be
true.
taken out of context,
Mm.
especially now with all the things
Yeah.
happening. My job and my profession, I feel it more and more. Like I wanna,
Yeah.
help
I
all the priests around me. Like,
Yeah.
Father, maybe we could
I
say
think I think I know what you're referring to, Martha, and that's another
exactly.
podcast episode in itself.
Another discussion altogether,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
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 But just maybe just summarize a little bit. I think it's great. Like it shows the freedom that we have as Catholics,
Yes.
wherein it's not imposed on me. That
Yeah.
there's still, I I don't want to get into the philosophical side. I am not
Yeah.
a philosopher
Yeah.
to begin with, but at least it's that free will
Yes.
to decide who to vote, right?
Yeah.
If I want to vote for this, just when I vote, I'll be thinking, okay, if I want to vote for this person, these are the things that are against, that are not really aligned
Yeah.
with what the Catholic Church is speaking.
Yeah.
So what's my decision? Do I go greater good aspect, or so many things to think about, especially
Yeah.
with the upcoming elections. But I think
Yes. Yeah.
in this list of Team Buhay at Team Patay, shout out to Tanan,
Yeah, di ba? Creative, right?
Tanan taga Bacolod, also coming from Bacolod myself.
Yeah.
It's really just highlighting the truth
Yeah.
and the context of, especially Ilonggo people can be, they think we're getting, they think we're laughing, but we're getting mad pala.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
intonation, all these things. Um,
Yeah.
it's really the highlight is what's the truth,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
That's
and
true.
what's the
That's true.
conscious decision in the guidance of the people that he's
Yeah.
catering to, right?
And the Catholic Church is very convinced, Mark, that truth, the truth is attractive enough that it would take care of the job of helping people make a choice.
Right.
So maybe
That's
you should
right.
really help them do the marketing of these ideas, because that's really their aim. We want to broadcast the truth, make people aware of it, and tap on that understanding that each of us have a capacity to know the truth, and you are attracted to the truth. And the hope is that we would all say, oh yes, that's obvious, let's choose that.
Hi everyone, it's Martha here, jumping in to remind you all to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to the discussion about separation of church and state shortly. Before we continue, we'd like to just mention a few of the organizations that have made this possible. So take a quick stand, rest your eyes, or do a little more research about separation of church and state, and we'll be right back after this.
No, interesting yung topic natin. I mean, like, we're getting into really important sort of intersection of the Catholic faith, and should we get involved in politics, or should we get involved in doing something for the country? There's a classic example of the Catholic Church, and it's unique to us in the Philippines, that the Catholic Church became very involved in politics. EDSA Revolution.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
remember
That's right.
this. Remember,
True,
Ted?
true.
Sorry, Ted, pero
Yes. Yes.
obvious yung edad natin dito, kay Martha.
Okay lang.
Be
Okay
quiet
lang.
na lang ako.
Ganyan ang buhay, di ba? I was, how old was I? But, so 1986, di ba? 1986, I remember I was in my room, and then I was listening constantly to the radio. I was very involved. I was out. I was already part of the Ligaya ng Panginoon community. I was already part of CYA, Christ Youth in Action. And we were helping out in the election and everything. And then we knew about the rebel soldiers, going to Camp Aguinaldo. And suddenly, the Cardinal Sin, comes out in the radio and tells us, go to EDSA, let's protect the soldiers in Camp Aguinaldo. And and I knew, okay, that's the right thing to do. And there's no clearer statement of the church, the Catholic Church, getting involved with that simple, slow voice of Cardinal Sin saying, let's go to EDSA and
Wow.
protect our troops in Camp Aguinaldo.
That's true. I remember that, no,
Yeah,
because I
Ted?
heard it. I was fourth year. I was about to graduate from college, and I heard that, and I actually went. I
Yeah,
remember
me
the
too.
meeting place was Isitan in Cubao, in Aurora. That was where the meeting place was. Kasi malapit sa Camp Aguinaldo yon, papuntang Camp Aguinaldo.
Yeah.
So that was where people massed up, assembled, and then went to EDSA and
Yes.
stayed there.
Yeah.
No, unang gabi yun. That was the first night of what became the EDSA Revolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. No, the I think the image that people remember whenever they talk about separation of church and state is really, and the church getting involved, politically, is really cardinal sin.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Cardinal sin. Yeah.
and actually, if you recall, no, parang parang kanta ni Britney Spears yan eh. Oops, I did it again. Kasi ginawa niya uli yan, 2001, remember? With
Yes.
and
Okay. I was born na then.
Again, right? Yeah. And he was already much weaker, but still, no, napapunta pa rin niya yung mga tao, no? And so again, the image of the church getting involved. But I think the question that people would be curious, di ba? Bakit magkikialam yung simbahan sa gano'n? Na klarong-klaro naman na politika yun, di ba? Wala, it doesn't involve questions of faith, di ba? So, bakit magkikialam si Cardinal? Bakit siya papasok doon sa, obviously, a political statement or a political action?
I have this homily from I'd like to just quote it directly from Pope Francis, and here he's talking about what it means to be a good Catholic. Just directly talks about our need to be involved and meddle in politics. Let me just read it to you quickly. He says, "Good Catholics meddle in politics, offer the best of themselves, so that those who govern can govern." Politics, according to the social doctrine of the church, this is Pope Francis still speaking, is one of the highest forms of charity because it serves the common good. He says, "I could not wash my hands, We all have to give something." End of quote. And I think here, the Pope is clearly saying, the social doctrine of the church, I mean, we don't have time to discuss it, but it's the church speaking about justice, about the dignity of human being, that each human being is of value. So when those things are under attack, a good Catholic must be reminded, hey, it is for the common good. We need to do something. And I think that's what Cardinal Sin clearly was expressing, because he knew that most of the Catholics did not have arms to go out.
Yeah.
He just said, go out there and protect the troops. And I knew what it meant to go out there and protect the troops. It means that I will stand up in a non-violent way, because I don't want violence to happen in the country. And the best way to solve that problem at that time was to go out there. And we've been doing it for several days already. The military could not actually do their thing because citizens were out there in a non-violent way, standing up and saying, "Hey, let's not fight. Let's not be violent. Let's protect each other in a non-violent way." So I think that's why I think Pope Francis is encouraging us, when the values of charity, integrity, life is under attack, it's part of our role to be involved in politics.
And I think that's right. I mean, for me, I love hearing stories about that. So, I mean, it's so beautiful to combat violence and fear of weaponry and armed tanks. Because I remember, even if I wasn't born in EDSA, not of course isolate the age gap, but
it's okay. It's okay.
It's okay.
To me, it was also real. To me, it was part of history, and it was a very pivotal role in the Philippine history, and it was real because also my parents were there.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
because I still hear stories about it. Like they were in the army trucks
Yeah.
going to Malacanang. And I think
Mm.
my sister was already born at that time. And
Uh-huh.
parang we had to leave her at the house because my grandparents and my parents went to EDSA, being Catholics themselves, my lolo being
Mm.
very like strict Catholic by the
Yeah.
book. So he followed, and I think it like awakened parang a realization to people when
Yes.
Cardinal Sin
Mm.
said that to na, okay, I can meddle pala, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can take action, and it would be
Yeah.
viewed as, oh, I have to be separated from church and state
Yeah.
affairs. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe because the when the cardinal spoke, no, for if you were part of the church, you were listening as a Catholic, it ceased to become just a political statement, eh? Because
Yes.
of course you knew that when the cardinal spoke, he was speaking because he thinks that there are values involved, that you need to take a stand, and so maybe at that point, he wanted people to go to EDSA, not to support those who were rebelling, against the Marcos government at the time, but also to meaning to take a stand, to take a stand for what he was saying is actually right. Integrity, testing government, for
Yeah.
example, freedom, and so if you share those values, then they cease to become political, diba? It became
Yes.
more of a faith, the expression of faith, not to go there. And
Yeah.
at EDSA, it was actually pretty amazing because uh, it's probably the first rally. I've been in many rallies before EDSA. It was probably the first rally where you could see statues of Mary
Hmm.
being carried around, and people clutching groceries, diba? And even non-Catholics, for example, would respect, would
Yes.
kneel down, for example, when people were praying, no? So yung mga tipong ganon. So yeah, you're right, no? It was pretty amazing, and but I think what was important there was people took a stand, and I
Yes.
think I agree with I like what Raul said about the whole of Pope Francis, that we have to give something. No, we cannot wash our hands. We have to
Yes.
give something. So I think that's part of who we are, as not only as Catholics or as part of the faithful, but as citizens. No? What I see here is that when we take a stand, it's not necessarily being political. When we take a stand, it's really reflecting that we are citizens, but we're also Catholics,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
you can't separate the two, eh. Hindi mo
Yes.
pwede paghiwalayin yung
Yes.
dalawa, eh.
Yeah.
Diba?
And
Katoliko ka, pero Pilipino ka rin at the same time.
tama.
Right? So, hindi ka
Yeah.
dapat nahihiwalay na Katoliko, bilang Katoliko, ito yung pinapaniwalaan ko, pero bilang Pilipino, ay pwede ako maniwala sa ibang bagay na totally kasalungat nung naniwalaan ko bilang Katoliko. Hindi
Yeah.
naman
Yes.
pwede yun, di ba?
Yes. And I think, di ba, Ted, I think we should not stop promoting this idea that we Catholics need to get involved in
Yes.
nation
Yes.
building and helping our country. Parang EDSA was like something that happened in 1986, but in one sense,
Yeah.
we continue to there is a lot of things that we could do as Catholics today, and it's been inspiring. I've been hearing stories of people responding, example to the pandemic. No,
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
they're making contribution, trying to do things for the health workers, and social
Mm.
media is very much active in, hey, let's do something, let's make a difference, oh, let's
Yeah.
help the poor.
And the youth, like
Mm.
I think they
The youth.
believe,
Yes,
if
yes,
they felt that now,
yeah,
that like I need to speak up. Now is
yeah,
the time more
True.
than
yeah.
ever.
True. That's true. That's true.
And it's that same spirit of what Pope Francis is saying. If you're a good Catholic, you need to meddle in politics
Right.
if it
Yes.
involves things that are very dear to us in terms of freedom, justice, and also helping those who are in the peripheries, no, those who are
Yes.
Yes.
less fortunate, those who are in need. Classic social teaching of the church. There is something wrong with society when there is great inequality. That's a basic Catholic teaching. And so part of what we need to recognize, hey, you need to get involved in politics if society eh, that you are in has a lot of poverty. That's one example. No, we cannot just wash our hands.
And that's basically the Philippines. I mean, the
Yeah, basically,
glaring
yes,
economic,
yes,
gap
yeah,
between
Yeah.
the
Right.
poorest of the poorest and the upper middle class. And
yeah. And that's one sense politics, right? I mean, getting involved in
Mm.
making a
Yeah.
difference in making society work better. No,
yeah,
I think that's part of who we are and something that we should keep on promoting. No, yeah,
at the end of the day,
We.
parang I threw back to EDSA might have been
mm-hmm.
our real example of like at the end of the day we are all the same citizens. Like
Yes,
we are
Yeah.
brothers and sisters. We are Filipinos,
yeah,
Mm.
regardless of if I'm Catholic, if I'm pro government, if I'm
yeah,
anti government.
Mm-mm.
Like
yeah.
we were just all Filipinos.
You
That's
remember the
right.
passage that I quoted a while ago when Jesus was saying, "Render to God what is God's."
Yeah.
In one
Mm-hmm.
sense, Pope Francis is saying the same here. If you're a good
Yeah.
Catholic, think about how you should live your life. You should render to God a kind of life that exhibits you believing in God. And part of that, I think, is
Mm.
the willingness to look at those who are in need, making a difference in society, promoting the truth. That is part of giving to God what is
What is
God's, because
God's?
God really
Right.
intended things to be better, for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for this time together. And in a way, this conversation, drawing back to my very first question, that when the media asked for a comment uh, from people in the church of significant roles, even to your point, Raoul, na even lay people, when the
Yeah.
media asked
Yeah.
them their opinion, it isn't the topic of separation in church and state.
Yeah.
Um, they can say it. I mean, it's to
Yeah. They can say
protect.
it. Yeah.
They can say what they feel. They can say their opinion
Yeah.
as to really educate with the goal, hopefully, that people take on. It's educating
Yes.
the
Yes.
morality.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and I hope that people don't feel bad or won't feel uncomfortable when they hear priests, bishop,
Yes.
ordinary Catholics expressing their opinion,
Right.
or yun nga, meddling or nakikialam.
Yeah.
That is a
And
great
yeah. And in one sense, actually, all of us Catholics who take our faith seriously should be able to express, what we believe in. Especially it
Mm.
involves, as we talked about a while ago, common good. No, we
That's
are
right.
free, and it's good for me to know that the state won't stop me from expressing that.
Yeah,
No? And
exactly.
that's
I'm
right.
just being a good Catholic. I'm following Pope Francis, and the state will support me in that effort to express. Me being a good citizen, I will want to express this. No? So
Good
I'm free
Catholics
to do that.
medal.
Yeah,
Good Catholics.
good
I think
Catholics.
as a Filipino, diba, we're always told to um, parang let's not talk about politics pag nasa
Yeah,
table. Parang ganon. I
yeah,
think we have to break that old
yes,
mentality that we're taught,
yeah,
right? Na
yeah,
good
Mm.
Catholics meddle in politics, as the
yes,
Pope said.
Right.
And we can go on and on, but
Yeah.
unfortunately,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
we have to end the conversation. And
yes,
this is just episode 1. So much more to
yeah,
look forward to.
yes.
And there's a lot more, a lot more to talk
A lot
about.
more.
There's a lot of
So much.
interesting things. In fact, some of it may sound like trivia to you, Martha and Raul. No, for example, I came from the court. I came from the Supreme Court. Have you heard about the centennial prayer for the court, where all the courts
Ooh.
start all their sessions with a prayer, and there's an
What?
actual
Ah,
prayer, and it's prayer that is given to all the judges, all the courts, and you start every session with that prayer. Now, it's called the centennial
Wow.
prayer for the court. Yeah.
okay.
Separation
So
of church
imagine
and state.
imagine all the imagine all the debate over the church now telling people to pray. Diba?
Yes.
Definitely. Another
Grabe, dami pa,
interesting,
madami pa.
pwede lang mga 2 hours tong podcast na to kung may
Yeah.
Yeah.
someone will
But
keep
definitely
listening.
something to look forward to for episode 2.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I'm looking forward to that next episode. I saw all the things that we prepared, and we have definitely a lot more points from our conversation today.
Mhm.
But for now, thank you so much for the conversation. Yung usapang ganito, definitely,
Yeah.
as a youth, I needed to be at this table. I
Yeah.
needed to medal as a good
Yeah.
Catholic, as a youth, someone of the youth. So thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Martha. Thank you,
Thank you
Martha.
then. Thank you then. It was
I enjoyed it.
enjoyable.
Salamat. Yeah.
Ulitin natin.
Yes. Sa beach
Definitely.
na, sa beach.
Babalik kami. Yeah.
When we're out of our homes,
Yes.
hopefully.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions for our lawyer or theologian in the next episode, feel free to comment them down on our Facebook channel and on YouTube as well. And if you like this episode, we really hope that you share this with a friend, share it to all your friends, and do leave a review on Spotify or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Don't forget as well, follow us on Lex Dei and send your thoughts and suggestions. First episode, great conversations, and we hope to see you next time.